balancing truth, principles, and perspective. This is the Equalizer Podcast. You've heard the phrase, let them eat cake. It's one of the most famous lines in history, supposedly said by Marie Antoinette when she was told her people had no bread. Now here's the twist. She probably never said it. But that doesn't matter because the story stuck. Why? Because it felt true. It captured something deeper, a ruling class so disconnected from reality that they couldn't even understand suffering when it was right in front of them. And that's where this stops being history and starts being right now. Because look around. We've got 80-20 issues, things almost everyone agrees on. Election integrity, transparency, fraud prevention, congressional insider trading restrictions, paying our TSA workers, removing criminal illegal immigrants from the country. And they go nowhere. Congress shuts down the government. TSA workers stop getting paychecks. Congress still gets paid. Agencies get used like chess pieces. People wait in 4-hour-long lines at airports while the Congress people cruise on through. Of course, Delta put a stop to that, and good for them. But they create rules for you that don't apply to them. And both sides don't solve problems, they weaponize them. This all kind of sounds like what the founders fought a war and pledged their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor to escape. In fact, during that time period, James Madison warned us about factions, their inevitability and their danger to the republic. People naturally break into groups formed around things like wealth, beliefs, interests, identity. You can't eliminate factions without destroying liberty itself, which of course is what communism attempts to do and is, in my opinion, the downfall of it, but I digress. At that point in time, we had a draft of the Constitution, but it wasn't ratified, and so Madison and Jay and Hamilton were making their cases for what the final outcome would be for our government system. The real threat at the time was a majority faction turning a democracy into a mob rule, and the ideas that Madison proposed centered on sort of three themes. One was a large republic. More people equals more competing interests, and that makes it harder for one faction to dominate the rest. 2, representation. Elected officials ideally filter public opinion before it becomes law. That slows down emotional or reactionary decisions in theory, but when you elect someone like AOC, not so much. 3, competing interests. Factions check each other, and it makes it hard for a single group to easily take control. See, Madison knew factions weren't the problem. Dominance was. The system only works if factions continue to compete, not when they turn the country into two sides trying to destroy each other. What we have now is something far worse. A political class insulated from consequences, detached from reality, and completely comfortable letting the rest of us fight it out. Madison's model assumes that there are multiple interests with fluid alliances, and they're able to come to rational compromise. It starts to break down when the factions harden into permanent camps, Republicans and Democrats. Opponents become enemies, communists versus fascists, and winning matters more than governing. We'll hold the government hostage until we get what we want. And here's the part that most people miss. It isn't just incompetence. This isn't just gridlock. And it's not even just corruption. It's a distraction. Because while we're fighting each other, we're not looking at what actually matters. Let's take Iran. Listen to how it's being framed. On one side, another forever war like Afghanistan, another Iraq-like nation-building quagmire, another unjustified disaster. And on the other, if you question it at all, you're un-American, weak, rooting for failure. Two extremes, same outcome, no real conversation. Because the truth is, Iran is a problem. A radical, theocratic regime that spent decades funding terror proxies, pursuing nuclear and missile capabilities despite sanctions, threatening the U.S. and Israel, and destabilizing the entire Middle East region. That part is real. But so is this. Jumping straight to forever war 2 days is just as lazy, especially when it's incongruent with their own past statements.
I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran. Whatever stage of development they might be in their nuclear weapons program in the next 10 years, during which they might foolishly consider launching an attack on Israel, we would be able to totally obliterate them.
Of course, today she's singing a different tune. Trump's war is horrible. And this is where the hypocrisy and simplicity almost looks manufactured, because it's more complicated than just what they say today versus what they said yesterday. And this goes for both sides. I mean, people against the war today were for it under Obama and Biden, and people for the war today were against it under Obama and Biden. Except, of course, Lindsey Graham. That guy hasn't seen a war that doesn't make his pants bulge. So if the reality is more complicated, why does everything feel so simple? Because simple keeps you divided. You don't question the simple things because it's simple. And if you really want to understand what's happening now, you have to go back to the last time the United States reshaped Iran. Not with bombs, not with war, but with something far more subtle. It's called Operation Ajax. In 1953, the United States overthrew Iran's government without firing a single shot. No invasion, no declaration of war, just money, media, and manipulation. Today, we're doing it again, just louder, faster, and with missiles. The question isn't whether we've seen this before. The question is, did we learn anything from it last time we saw it? Let's rewind to 1953. Years earlier, Iran elected a prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. His crime? He nationalized his oil. Not American oil, not stolen oil, Iranian oil inside Iran. And that threatens British interests. Britain calls the United States, and suddenly this isn't about oil anymore. It's about the Cold War. It's about what if Iran goes Soviet? And just like that, a democratically elected leader becomes a strategic threat. The CIA faced a problem that couldn't be solved through conventional warfare. Iran hadn't attacked the U.S., hadn't threatened the U.S. or our allies. There was no legal justification for an invasion. So they chose a different path: destabilization. First, economic strangulation. Britain cuts off Iranian oil exports. The economy collapses. No bombs, no blockade, just no money. Two, the information war starts. The CIA floods the media with stories. Mossadegh is unstable. Mossadegh is a communist. It doesn't matter if it's true. It just has to sound true. Three, internal fracture. They don't create the opposition, but they amplify it. Military leaders, religious figures, royalists, all pushed in the same direction. Let's get rid of Mossadegh. August 19th, 1953, protests hit the streets. Some real, some paid for. The military stands down. Mossadegh is arrested. The Shah returns to power. And to the outside world, it looks like Iran did it to itself. Operation Ajax worked. That's the uncomfortable truth. It achieved exactly what it set out to do. And it created one of the United States' most dangerous enemies in the process. Because what did it teach Iran? That democracy doesn't matter if it conflicts with Western interests. The Shah, put back into power, rules as an autocrat. He's backed by the U.S. and enforced by secret police. And when that system finally collapses in 1979 during the Iranian Revolution, it doesn't swing back to democracy. It swings hard into something far more extreme, something far more radical, a theocracy bent on the destruction of the West. The United States removed a negotiable nationalist and replaced him with a regime that defines itself by chanting death to America, death to Israel, the great Satan and the little Satan. Now, fast forward to today. Same countries, same tensions, completely different method. 1953 was covert, quiet, deniable. 2026, airstrikes, assassinations, open conflict. You can't miss it. 1953 was bribes and propaganda. 2026 is missiles and military pressure. Same objective, influence Iran. Different playbook. Here's what most people miss. These aren't separate stories. Operation Ajax isn't history. It's the prequel. The regime we're dealing with today exists because of what happened in 1953. That distrust, that hostility, that belief that the United States manipulates governments, it's not propaganda, it's memory. And that memory is shared not just among the hardliners, the ayatollahs and the mullahs, but amongst the Iranian people who can look back and see America and the West as usurpers and destabilizers, because we were. Then there's the stakes. Geography hasn't changed. The Strait of Hormuz was there in 1953, 1979. It remains there today. It's always been a primary shipping lane for Middle East oil that's fed the world. So what has changed? Weapons and capability. That's what made it time to clean up the mess we made almost 50 years ago. Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon is an absolute fact. Iran has gone to great lengths to shield their enrichment process and progress from the rest of the world, operating underground quite literally and in secret. Then they sauntered in and casually dropped the reality at negotiations that they had 430 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, enough to build 10 nuclear bombs within a matter of weeks. That's not hyperbole, it's fact. They've quietly built missile technology that resulted in 2 medium-range ballistic missiles that doubled their stated missile range, flying 2,500 miles. For years, the assumption was Iran capped its missiles at 2,000 kilometers. Then, overnight, they demonstrated something closer to 4,000 kilometers. So here's the real question. If destabilization created the problem, what do you think more pressure would solve? Because we've seen this movie before. Short-term win, long-term consequences. In 1953, we controlled the outcome by staying invisible. In 2026, we're trying to control the outcome in full view of the world. The only question left is, are we going to solve the problem or write another 50 years of it? Now, it's my take that doing this in the sunlight, in the openness of active military conflict, puts too many eyes on it for us to get it wrong. What we did 50 years ago, or more than 50 years ago, 60 years ago, was create an environment secretly, covertly, where we could push a little bit more, push a little bit more, push a little bit more, because nobody would know, nobody would see it, nobody would hear about it. What we're doing today is in plain view of the rest of the world. Look at what we're doing. Here's our stated reasons. You can say what you want about the Trump administration and whether you agree with the war, but his transparency on this, the administration's transparency has been top-notch. It has been out there. They've been talking about it. They've been more transparent in this military action than anyone else I can think of going back into history, recent history. So you can disagree with them if you want. You can disagree with the objectives. You can disagree with the war itself. But to call them non-transparent would be a mistake. And I think doing it in the openness, in the sunlight of the worldview, puts this in a bit of a different place than what we did in 1953 and what we've done in other years in other places. So now you've seen it, what destabilization looks like when it's done on purpose. You have an example, a frame of reference, carefully, quietly, strategically done. Now here's the uncomfortable question. What happens when no one has to actually do it anymore? Because today, the same effects don't require an intelligence agency. They run on algorithms, headlines, incentives. And the result? Disconnected, divided, distrusting everything. Not by accident, by design. In 1953, destabilization had to be engineered. It took agencies, governments, shadowy smoke-filled back rooms. Today, it sustains itself. So we've seen what destabilization looks like when it's done to a country like Iran. Quiet, indirect, plausibly deniable. But here's the uncomfortable part. It doesn't stay overseas. Because the same playbook doesn't need intelligence agencies anymore. What used to require the CIA now runs on autopilot. Social media algorithms, media headlines, talking heads, political rhetoric. Different actors, same effect. And this is exactly the core idea behind my new book, The Invisible War. Destabilization isn't new. It's one of the oldest tactics in human conflict. Sun Tzu wrote, "For to win 100 victories in 100 battles is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill." That was 2,000 years ago. What has changed is that it's been refined from a covert operation into a long game system. Sun Tzu's insight was not that violence should be avoided for moral reasons. It was that violence is inefficient. Battle's costly, unpredictable, and exhausting. Even victory in battle can weaken the victor. And history has shown that nations can be rendered ungovernable without external conquest. Social media algorithms don't reward truth, they reward engagement. And what drives engagement? Anger, fear, outrage, resentment. So what gets amplified? The most divisive version of reality. Media headlines aren't built to inform you, they're built to hook you, draw you in. Nuance doesn't go viral, conflict does. Nobody cares about people talking. They care about people that are screaming. Talking heads, you don't get airtime for saying it's complicated. You get airtime for saying they are the problem, get them. Politicians, they don't win by calming things down. They win by picking a side and turning the volume up. One social media narrative sent out by 10 foreign accounts spreads like wildfire. 50 shares turns into 5,000, turns into 50,000. And now the media picks it up and runs with it. It becomes the feature of the evening news. Talking heads debate it. It's on every show. Factions see a way to gain legitimacy and edge to bash the other side. It doesn't matter if the story is real or even true. And the result isn't just disagreement. It's something much more dangerous. It's disconnection. It's designed to make you go, stop, I can't take it. Because if you can't agree on facts, you can't solve problems. If you don't trust institutions, they can't function. If you see the other side as the enemy, cooperation becomes impossible. Destabilization doesn't destroy systems directly. It erodes the trust that allows them to function. Here's the part that should make you stop for a second. No one has to be in control for this to work. This isn't about some mastermind pulling strings. It's about incentives. Everyone, media, platforms, politicians, are rewarded for behavior that increases division. In 1953, destabilization had to be engineered. Money had to be moved, narratives had to be planted, opposition had to be coordinated. Today, we do it to ourselves at scale. That's the evolution. Destabilization didn't disappear after the Cold War. It got cheaper, faster, and more effective. Because the most powerful version of destabilization is the one that looks organic. The war hasn't changed. You just don't recognize it because it doesn't look like a war anymore. What if I told you the most dangerous war in history isn't being fought on a battlefield, but inside the very institutions you trust? We've been trained to wait for the 9/11 moment, the smoke, the sirens, the sudden collapse. But while we've been watching the horizon for missiles, the floor has been dismantled beneath our feet. In my new book, Invisible War: How Nations Collapse Without War, I pull back the curtain on a strategy of conflict that Sun Tzu whispered and modern ideologies have perfected: the art of destabilization. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a structural autopsy of a nation in freefall. For our entire lives, we've been living through a silent, cascading system of feedback loops designed to make a country ungovernable without a single shot being fired. It starts with the quiet erosion of institutional legitimacy and ends with a society so fragmented that we no longer share the same reality. We are witnessing the weaponization of our own media, our own hiring processes, and our own psychological need to belong. The invisible war is a slow burn, the death of 1,000 cuts where the victim is taught to defend the blade. As a former Marine and systems analyst, I've spent my career studying how structures hold together under pressure. Right now, those structures aren't just under pressure, they're being strategically dissolved. The war isn't coming, it's been here for decades. And while it isn't won yet, we are dangerously close to the point of no return. I wrote this book to be your manual for the shadows, because the first step to winning a war is finally admitting you're in one.